Well,
Morning.
I see almost as many faces as we started with. I think only one's had to leave. I think Neil had to leave early today, right? Yeah. He was having had a doctor's appointment to look into the problems he's having with his hand, and so it's kind of important, I think, to make that. But and I guess while I'm thinking about people that aren't here, we had 4 people that kind of had to cancel that all expected to be here. That most of whom we all know well. Wiley, of course, who did send half a case of wine that I keep forgetting to bring up. Sorry about that. It's around somewhere. So, yeah. And of course Ron Binding, whose wife was had some surgery and all went really well, but it was a little scary at first till they kind of got in there and found out that it was not anyway. So and then Carrie, who was here last year, of course, just had a lot going on and just said emotionally wasn't ready. So we definitely miss her, but she'll be back next year. And then Dennis, who missed last year too for various reasons, and was all excited to come back. And of course, some of you that know that he moved to, I think, North Carolina, and got a new job and stuff, and then got COVID like about a month ago, and that ended up using up all of his vacation and/or sick time. So I think that's but I didn't forget anybody? Oh, well, then there's the Bobs. Yeah, there's a couple of Bobs, who we knew weren't coming. Bob Ring had to take this year off and expects to be back next year, and Bob Lindsay, who who ended up leaving last year a little bit early too for another medical thing that turned out to be fine. But yeah, he sort of left in a bit of a panic. And he's off riding a bicycle in Croatia, I think.
Poor baby.
Yeah, things are tough all over, But so his soon-to-be ex-wife who planned this, never mind. Yeah, no. But and as Bart mentioned, he lost his dad recently, and that was something that had been sort of touch and go for like the last 5 years. I mean, he always said, "Hey, I'm not sure. I might have to cancel at the last minute for Dad." Well, I think we're all either close to that stage with our parents or have already been there, and it's tough. So.
Hey, Neil, by the way, talking about that, just so everybody knows, I mentioned that it would be a card outside. Nolly's going to bring one tonight to sign, and we'll just set it on the stage.
Thank you very much.
Just so you know,
Thanks,
if
Bart.
I wasn't there. It'll be here tonight.
So that's a few have been asking about a team picture that we should try to schedule sometime today. And we could almost do it now, except everybody's like settled and things. So any thoughts on that? Should we just try to do it just before the evening?
Well, there's several people that aren't in the room this morning too, so.
Right.
But maybe we could write it on the board.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. And
We'll all have our Hawaiian shirts later.
yeah.
People seem to show up for dinner.
Yeah, so maybe before we do the evening, maybe like 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
Does that seem like it'd work?
Yeah.
Okay, that way you can have your,
Everybody wants to do their collaborations, and so just right before that, maybe. because
Yeah.
everyone will be here.
yeah, everybody's gonna have to be
Before
here.
dinner or after dinner?
After dinner, I think, because I think people are gonna straggle in and out for dinner,
Yeah.
like we do for breakfast. So, okay, we'll make it 7 o'clock, and if there's enough light, we'll do it like maybe just right outside here with the building in the background, building right behind us or something like that. And we'll have to get a volunteer. Maybe we'll have a couple different people take the. I don't know. We'll figure that out. Where's Jeff Cohen's wife? She was always.
Pretty good photographers on the video camera.
Yeah, but they got to be in the picture though
Yeah,
too.
that's true.
I know how to cut a fish.
Okay. There we go. Okay, so what has everybody learned in the last couple of days that I should either go over again or never bring up again?
Not to stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, Carol's got an interesting new rule. No staying up till 1 o'clock in the morning.
12:45.
12:45, yeah. Yeah, I thought 12:30 was good enough last night, you know, when the night before it was 1:30. And this morning at 8 o'clock when the sun came bursting through my window, I thought 12:30 is not good enough. That was tonight, 11:30. Maybe, we'll see. Not as important as what's going on. Oh, airport rides tomorrow. Is everybody set up who needs one? I know somebody had the earliest one.
Well, mine, right? I think.
Yeah, yours is at 10, right? Yeah. And you don't have anything lined up yet tomorrow, right?
I think we do, yeah.
You do?
I'm just trying to work out between Mike and Paula.
Oh, okay. And
I was talking with Ann about taking me. My plane is at 11.
okay.
Is anybody flying out of SFO or is everybody flying out of San Jose?
Any San Francisco flyers? Probably not. Do you need? Is your flight there?
Okay, it's all set up. If there was somebody who's going to San Francisco, I might go with them, but I've got a shuttle from San Jose.
Oh, from San Jose.
That's fine.
And what time do you have to get out early for that?
I gotta be there for 6:45.
In the morning?
Yeah.
At San Jose Airport?
San Jose Airport.
Okay.
So, Jeff is flying up tomorrow morning too, so he's basically leaving an hour earlier than he normally would.
Ah, okay. So you guys are going to be out of here at like 6 o'clock or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that at that time in the morning, it's about 20 minutes to the airport from here, you know, so you don't have to be it's still going to be before the sun is up, of course, but yeah.
I've got a car to take to the airport, and so I can take people. I just don't know when I'm leaving.
Did you book a flight yet?
That's something we should ultimately.
So do you have a flight tomorrow though, David?
One more glass to kill the pain.
So, okay, well, just want to make sure that everybody's kind of got a plan for that. Oh, so Mark, there's one thing you mentioned. We don't really have to be out of here, like doors locked and down the hill at 11 o'clock in the morning. So, because usually we don't even really start getting cleaning up much stuff until most people are gone. So what I'm getting at is if you take somebody early and you can come back and hang out here and go for a swim or something. It's so yeah okay. Anything else? Any other announcements or questions anybody wants to run by?
Have you thought about next year's dates?
Same day, September 11th next year.
Have you ever thought about doing it twice a year?
I've been thinking about doing it for like a month at a time. What do you think? Should we do a 3-week session? We talked in the past about. That's the wrong time. Wow, that can't be nice.
It's not 9:30, but it's close.
Yeah. I don't.
That was
Oh,
October error.
that was Ann? Okay. Ann's head is getting too big, apparently, and she's full of herself. So, I'm sure you've all had a good chance to meet my wonderful sister, and I am really lucky to have just everybody around me that you've met most of my kids. Well, this year was only Rebecca, and of course Nani puts in a lot of work for this, and I guess while I'm thanking people, Lynn is somebody else who contributed with all the work for the embroidered bags. Lisa, I already thanked Lisa for the pics, so she doesn't get mentioned today. And really all of you for making this not only what it is, but just for taking time out of the rest of your life to do this. But so it's wonderful. I don't think we could handle twice a year though, Jen. We did talk about doing them maybe on the other side of the country one time or something.
Yay, yes. I vote for that.
part of the difficulty there, and we did this a couple of years ago. Oh, so somebody else I didn't mention that is not here that we hope is back next year because she had a lot to do with us actually doing camps elsewhere, is Karina. A lot of you don't know Karina, but she kind of came on board by about the second year, much like Dave. And the very first year, if you've seen any of the videos, which was 2013, we had a little bit more, we kept people busy the whole time. Almost nobody touched a guitar the whole time they were there. We had something going on. It was a little shorter. I think it was just 3 days. We had, a concert in Felton, and we had a lot of guest speakers and teachers come in. Alex DeGrassi, who got mentioned the other day. Muriel did a thing. I think Muriel Anderson, Steve Palazzo, a local Santa Cruz bluegrass guy.
Was Doug there the first year?
Yeah, and Doug did a workshop. So that was. So we really kept people just hopping the whole time, and with unnecessarily throwing stones at the person that made that happen. Really, none of this would be possible without my Totally Guitars partner Matt, and Matt really got the ball rolling with this. First of all, in 2009, with suggesting that we start a video site for lessons, and I'm thinking, are you out of your mind? Nobody's going to. Who's going to want to take lessons from a TV from your computer screen? Turned out that was a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
So, and then a couple of years later, 2012, well 13, there were some comments on the forum about guitar camps. And somebody I think I mentioned this just the other day, but somebody had put in sort of a digging comment. It's like, oh, you guys don't know anything about camps. There's no way you can do this. And so that my Australian friend just gets, puts his fists up and is ready to says, I'll show you what we can do at camp, And it was, I had taught at other camps before. There was one called the California Coast Music Camp, and many of you have probably been, I know a lot of you have been to other camps for one thing or another. And particularly my partner Greg, who was here yesterday, would go always to a big fiddle thing in Port Townsend, Washington, and or folk, I guess, more stuff. And but at most of those, you have to make a lot of choices. What am I going to do? I've got 6 things to choose from every hour or something like that. And I think Paulette was one of the people that told me that she'd been to camps where there were 100 people there, and she left not even knowing any one of their names or something. I probably exaggerated a bit on that, but yeah. And you can see that this is really different, and it's so cool that we can keep it this small, because kind of my goal was for everybody to really have the same experience, and so even from the first day, you feel like if you're here for your first year, and you should be feeling like you've been to all, that you haven't missed any of these. So I hope that feeling is still all happening, and I know with how many people keep coming back and again make it an important part of your year. I really appreciate that. So okay. Put away the handkerchiefs. Let's see, today I want to just kind of review a little bit of some of the stuff that we talked about, because I'm sure a lot of it is still floating around in the ether somewhere. But I could play a few things too, and some of the things I'll play will be demonstrating, what did I play the other day that was like that? Jetstream, kind of an example of some of the stuff you can do on the guitar. Want to kind of re-emphasize how important that card was that had the alphabet on it, because you can really use that to get your thirds and fourths and fifths down and get used to thinking about the notes and chords by particularly thirds. That's why it's important. And I think, does everybody have a little bit better handle now on, I think I might have used an example like an A flat minor chord. If we had to figure out what were the notes in A flat minor, I hope you have a kind of a path to do that now, instead of, what the hell, I'm never going to play that chord. Why do I have to know what notes are in it? But if you just have a little inkling of the theory behind it, it's not that big a deal. So does everybody feel like you have a little bit better handle on that? Okay. So what are the notes in A flat minor, David?
No, I
I was just asking you a question.
Okay, good. Wait a minute, he's trying to stall.
No idea, A flat minor is, except I just go to the sixth string and I know where A flat is, and I know where a minor is, and that's it.
Perfect. Okay, so that was one of the things I kind of wanted to get to today. Some of the things, if you've been watching the weekly videos I do, about a few months ago, I started throwing in quick tips, and as most of you know me pretty well, sometimes what I might call a quick tip might be a very long story. But
You're very helpful, by the way. You're very good.
Oh, thanks. Good. And I'm always open to suggestions of things. You know, sometimes it just occurs to me what I'm going to talk about when I've already got the camera running. It's like, oh shoot, I need a tip. You know, so what can I talk about today? Well, did I do that last week? You know, it's. But no, I'm definitely open to suggestions on that. And something that David just brought up maybe opens the whole door for today's topic, which is. Knowing the notes on the sixth and the fifth strings can be really helpful, because one of the most important things you need to be able to do as a guitar player is understand bar chords and how they work and where to go to play A flat minor, for example. And so we pick A flat. You just have to process a few little bits and pieces of things. You have to know the minor shape out of the E family and the A family. That's pretty simple so far, right? Everybody's on top of that? Here's minor, right? I mean, this is E minor. So if I play that any place on the neck, it's a minor chord. And the root of it will always be the note that is on the sixth string, because that's the E string. The other family is, of course, the A family. And I know, so A minor, everybody knows A minor, right? Now this doesn't help you get to A flat minor very well, because you'd have to take it to what fret? 11. To get A to A flat, the A shape, yeah. You're right, but out of the E's, it's at 4, right? Okay, so there are certain chords that you're only going to play out of one of them, because I don't want to see anybody putting bars at the 11th fret. It's not only is it difficult, it's going to sound terrible. You know, the bass strings, you know, when you get up high, the bass strings really lose a lot of their tone. And so, you know, 10th fret is about the limit, I would say, for most chords, but even out of the E family, getting the shape at the 10th is difficult. You know, so F sharp and C sharp, the two chords that would happen at the 9th, are what I would almost consider the end of bar chord world. When you're going to play that high, you hopefully you've got somebody else playing something else lower, so you don't need those bass notes anyway. You've got a bass player or a piano player or something. Or they're useful. Where I was really going to get to today was talking about playing just these 3-string triads that I kind of alluded to the other day, and I want to go a little bit further into that. But before we do that, I wanted to kind of just review some general bar chord stuff, which is we got the E and the A family, and we have 5 important members of each family that you should be on top of. What are they? No, I'm talking about the types of chords, not the letters. Major and minor are like mom and dad. And then we have 3 kids. And they are what? Minor 7, dominant 7, and major 7, right? So those 3 shapes, those 3 kids of mom and dad, you should just have down really well.
Say those 3 again.
And I'm going to play through each one in just a second too. But yeah, so what we have are major and minor, of course, right? And then 3 7th chords. 7, major 7, and minor 7. And does everybody know the difference between a major 7 chord and a dominant 7 chord?
Please review this.
Yeah. I'm going there, but yeah. But Jim's had you singing all these things, so it should be really obvious, right? That a major 7 chord, think about, what song is this? Yeah. Okay, so that is a major 7 chord, right? And yeah. say about bars up here?
Yeah. So is the major 7 the one that has only a half step between and?
Yeah, and so this is the interval. We've talked a little bit about intervals, thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, sevenths, right? When you talk about, and it's just a way of labeling the distance between two notes. Now this gets confusing because we also use some of the same terms to be a type of chord. So if I ask you about a major seventh, you know, and I say, well, what's a major seventh? You say, well, there's a couple things. It's the distance between two notes that happen to be almost as big as an octave, happen to be the closest thing to an octave that isn't an octave, and it's a type of chord that includes that interval plus some other notes. So let me back up a little bit on that because that probably left a few confusing thoughts. So when we talk about a chord, first of all, the definition of a chord is 3 or more notes. It can be any 3 notes. I can play an A, a B, and a C. Now, that's a chord. We might have a little trouble coming up with a name for it, but we could probably come up with something. But sometimes, you know, if you ever use Guitar Pro to like write things out, or you know, most of you have probably downloaded some the stuff that I write out in lessons. I use Guitar Pro for, and if you just put in some notes there, and it'll tell you what chord it is. Well, we come up with a chord like that, and it might say A minor add 9 no fifth. And no 7th or something, you know, that would already be the add 9. And so it's pretty far down the formula path when you have unusual combinations of that. That happened to be 3 notes that were very close to each other. That's what makes it an unusual sounding chord. 2 of the notes were a half step apart. It was an A, a B, and a C, right? But they were spread out by an octave, but I did have the B and the C right next to each other, you know? Yeah, very pleasant sound to some people. Depends on, you know, your demons, I guess. So, chord, 3 notes or more. If you only have 2 notes, this is a power chord. This is not a chord. Wait, this is a power chord. It just broke the definition of what I just said. This is not a chord. This is an interval. It's called a power chord. I'll get back to that story, maybe. But it's just a fifth. So, you know, we talked about that a little bit when I played Smoke on the Water and things. So the first thing about a chord is it's got to have 3 or more notes in it, okay? But then chords are typically built in thirds, stacking notes. And so as you should all be on top of now because of everything that Jim and I have been talking about, is that there are 4 triads. A triad is a very specific type of chord. It has more restrictive rules. And that is the third, it's 2 thirds. It's 1, 3, and 5. And the distance between those thirds can only be a step and a half or 2, right? Everybody's got that drilled in from yesterday and the day before. And so consequently, there are only 4, since we only have 2 distances in there, and we have 2 possibilities for each distance, there are only 4 possible combinations, right? And that's the step and a half twice, or 2 steps twice. We've barely talked about augmented chords. I talked about them a little bit earlier, but one of the reasons is because they're kind of a specialty chord, and they don't occur naturally in any of our scales, in our modal scales, meaning major and minor and all the other modes that we talked about. So getting back to the sevenths, is all the 7th chords have 4 notes in them. There's part of the definition. It's another third tacked on top of the ones you had. And so, just like we have 2 possibilities for the interval from 1 to 3 in a chord, and from 3 to 5, we have the same thing. 5 to 7 can either be a step and a half or 2. Now, since 5 can be a different note. In a diminished or augmented chord, you've got a different fifth than you do in the major and minor chords, right? So that opens the door to the 7th being 3 different notes. But there are the 2 common ones, because mostly what we're talking about is now 7th chords built on major or minor triads. We're not gonna, Jim had you singing some diminished type triads that had sevenths in them, I think, right? You were doing
Yeah,
some
we-
minor seven
we-
flats.
We did both the diminished seventh and the minor seven flat five, not a lot, but we touched on.
Yeah, yeah, and those are harder ones to sing. You know, you just heard the chord, the major seven chord, and if you think about Color My World, that's a really good example of a major seven chord. And so to get back to what Sarah brought up just a second ago, is major seven chord has a major seventh in it. The distance of a major seventh is from 1 to 7 of that scale. So we're talking about a major seventh from A, it's the 7th note of the A scale, which is of course G sharp, because 7 to 8 is always a half step. So we sometimes talk about the 7th being a major 7th, meaning it's that the G sharp in the case of A, or a minor 7th, a half step less, which means it's a whole step below the octave. That would be G natural.
You know, dominant seven.
Well, we haven't gotten to the chord yet. I'm only talking about the interval,
Oh, okay.
right? But that's the interval that happens in the chord called dominant 7. And so that's the difference, of course, between, and just like if I say play a D chord, you assume I meant D major. You know, if I said something a little bit unusual, we're playing, get away from this a little bit. We're playing Sultans of Swing. Opens up on a minor chord. Then it has a bunch of major chords. Great progression. Anyway. Okay, anyway. I might kind of refer to the D chord that was in the song if we're talking about a lot of stuff and I'm trying to get through something fast. And in that case, I meant D minor. Because, but the way I phrased it, it's like, okay, that you know, I wouldn't call this D ever. You know, I would always say minor. But I might say something like the D chord in the song, which could have been, you know, D major 7 or something like that. Okay, so there's two possibilities for the 7th. It can either be a half step less than an octave or a whole step less than an octave. And to throw a little confusion on the fire, of course, the bigger one of those is the one that's a half step less than an octave, because the whole step less is smaller, because we measure the intervals from the bottom, right? Okay, so last thing about that is when we use the term dominant 7, we generally don't bother to say dominant in there. We just call it 7. The same way we don't say major necessarily unless we're trying to be more specific. So that, you know, that's a place where people do get confused sometimes too, as we're talking about, you know, if I say play A7, I don't want, sometimes to distinguish, I'll say, well, just play A regular 7 or A plain 7. All that throws more confusion into the mix. And so that's the 3 chords you need to know for the E and the A families. So for A7.
So I'm still not clear on this.
Okay.
So if a major 7th is 1/2 step, the 7th is 1/2 step below the octave.
Right.
And a minor 7th, the 7th is a whole step below the octave.
Right.
What is just a 7th? Because you said there were 3.
But the minor 7th has a minor 3rd, I think.
Oh, she's
The
at.
chord is a minor chord. So it's a minor, a major, and a minor 3rd.
Right.
Stacking.
Right. So if you want to talk about how they're stacked, now we have 3 intervals in a 7th chord.
Okay.
3 internal intervals. So this is also a place where it can get confusing, because a lot of times we'll measure these intervals all from 1. So what we have in a 7th chord is a 3rd, a 5th, and a 7th.
Of some sort.
Of some sort, right. But then all of those internal intervals from 1 to 3, 3 to 5, and 5 to 7, there's 2 possibilities for all of those. So does that mean there are 8 types of 7th chords? Because I've got 3 things now that could be one of 2 things. Don't answer that.
Could I just say one quick thing?
Sure.
That is why I keep saying break down everything chromatically from like the 7th to the 5th to the 5th to the 3rd, because
Right.
every answer is within that. To me, one chromatic half step is like one little teeny weeny building block that you could go like this with if you were teaching kids, you know, and you could say, look, we just take that one building block away. Now it's that many chromatic steps from there to there. So that's my input.
But,
Yeah.
so to follow up, so when people just say, play G7, you're believing, you should assume that it's G major with A flatted 7.
Perfect.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Rob?
That's kind of where I was going, is one of the confusing things that confused me forever was when you say a major 7, an A major 7. The major 7 refers to the note, not the chord. The chord is assumed to be the A major. And
Right.
then when you say major 7, it's like you're saying A major 7.
Okay.
You're assuming that the tonic, that the mother chord already is major, so you're not duplicating the terms.
Right.
But when you say A minor 7, now the minor refers to the chord,
Yeah.
not and independently the note, because now you're not saying major 7.
Right. Okay. So a better way to label seventh chords is to give them two names. Tell me what kind of triad it was, major, minor, diminished, maybe even augmented, and tell me what kind of seventh I have on top of it.
Right.
So,
You have 8 different ones, right?
well, kind of, except when we get into the augmented world, we start getting to where the seventh is one again.
Yes.
So that causes a problem too. You know. So yes, augmented seventh chords are something. Pretend I never said that. Yeah, okay. We're not going there. Yeah, stop. Blot that one out.
You know, for me, sometimes I think that, I kind of said this the other day, is I kind of think of music as, because I'm a weirdo, is it's like Disneyland. And it has Frontierland, it has Fantasyland, you know. And diminished chords and augmented chords are a different land.
Yeah.
And there's really cool things in that land, and you want to go over there and explore it, just like in Disneyland.
Yeah.
But if you put it in compartments like that, then everything that we're talking about right now can be whatever your favorite place is in
That's
Disneyland.
a great way of thinking of it.
Yeah. Yeah. How many go straight to New Orleans Square? No, first I'm going to the Matterhorn.
Yeah, Billy Joel described it as different countries. You know, the key of D flat is some different country.
Yeah. So if we were to label all the seventh chords with two names, one telling me what kind of triad I have and one telling me what kind of seventh, we would now have two seventh chords built on a major triad. And that would be a major triad with a major seventh and a major triad with a minor seventh. Well, so we could call that one major. Well, and if we had the minor seventh on it, we could call it major. Major triad, minor seventh. That's the only two possibilities for a seventh chord built on a major triad. Then we have two possibilities for a seventh chord built on a minor triad. So this would be minor, or minor major, or diminished minor, or diminished. Okay. Get me out of New Orleans Square. And so we really have four kinds of seventh chords built on major and minor triads. With me on that? Three of them account for 95% of the seventh chords you're going to play in your life. Until you start playing Stairway to Heaven and a few other songs like that use the oddball one, which I'll get to in just a minute. But to kind of elaborate on something Rob said, when we call a chord B flat or D or something, that means we have a major third in there. We don't need to say the word major to tell us the third is major. Basically, a third is always major unless the word minor is in the chord. That flips the switch. And the word minor in a chord only is talking about the third. That's the only thing. The difference between B flat 13 and B flat minor 13, those are two 7-note chords, Very difficult to play on a 6-string guitar. Not difficult to play on a piano, but if you don't have if you don't have 7 fingers, you're not going to be able to do it. But in big chords like that, we can leave certain things out. But those 2 7-note chords, B flat 13 and B flat minor 13, there's only 1 note difference. And what note is that in a B flat 13 chord?
It's a D. It's a D.
It's a D. And would that be in B flat 13 or B flat minor 13?
It would be
Minor.
D
Flat 13.
major.
It's major. The D is major in a B flat chord, and a B flat minor chord would have to have
D flat.
D flat in it. So, for extra credit, what are all the rest of the notes in B flat minor 13? Stop. No, I'm sorry, just kidding. Just seeing who's paying attention. That's one of those, Lynn brought up something interesting the other day. We were talking about if you get pulled over by a policeman for drunk driving, and he asks you to do the alphabet backwards, if you try it, you'll get arrested for being drunk. If you're sober, you know you can't do it. And you'll tell him, nobody can do that. And he'll let you go. Okay, so we're not going into the B
By
flat.
experience.
Of course not.
Yeah. Okay, but why do we have number? Let me finish the other thought. Okay, thirds are major unless the word minor is in a chord. Got it?
Yeah.
Sevenths. If I call a chord B flat 7, what kind of seventh do I have in that chord?
Major.
Minor seventh. Yeah, so dominant's not actually the right word for that, right? But it's a dominant, right? That's talking about the name for the chord. But the seventh itself is a minor seventh, right? So the same way thirds default to major, unless you specify otherwise, sevenths are always minor, unless you specify otherwise by using the word major. The word major in a chord is only in there to talk about the seventh, nothing else. The difference between B flat 13 and B flat major 13 is 1 note, the seventh.
It might also be helpful to show what the chord notation looks like when you're looking at a chord sheet for those different sevenths, because the first time I saw the major seventh symbol, I didn't know what it was.
So in something that's evolved kind of in jazz terminology and chord lead sheets, which is a page. John had one a little while ago. We were looking at It's Only a Paper Moon. A lot of times when I'm making an arrangement of something, I'm really just looking at it from like a fake book. Now, a fake book or a sheet like that is something that just has the melody written out in notation, 1 note at a time, which you'd be singing, and chord names over each one. And I'm sure all of you have seen like the way I do chord charts, which is mostly for songs that are strumming and singing things and stuff like that. And it's usually just a matrix of layout of measures, right? But as jazz has kind of evolved into certain things, I'll show somebody the chords to Black Orpheus, and at the very beginning it says A, and there's a minus sign next to the A. Well, that means minor in chord notation world. And there might be, the next chord might be, let's pick a different song, it might be B flat major 7, since B flat has become the color of the day. And there would be a triangle next to the B flat. Okay, Dan, why is that?
Well, I don't know why.
I don't either. I was hoping you would. Come on, Dan, bail me out here.
So triangle is major seven?
Triangle means major 7, and if they pay more attention to it, sometimes you'll see a 7 right next to it. So sometimes you see the triangle, a delta sign, and other times, sometimes you might see that with a 7.
Or a 9, or 11, or 13.
Right, but in that case, that symbol, the triangle, is also only talking about the 7th.
That's right.
So, and that's telling us that the 7th is not its default, which is minor, which makes the chord dominant. A minor 7th and a major 3rd, minor 7 is kind of the definition of a dominant chord, but then you can also extend those dominant chords to have more notes in them, a 9th, 11th, or a 13th, or a sharp 9, or a flat 9.
And I just raised it because if you take at the real book or something, I didn't know when I was looking. I got the real book and I was looking, what is all this stuff?
Yeah.
And it just, and I had to go online and figure it out.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll see a superscript 0. Oh, you know what? I'm sure that some people are not really clear on the fact that we have a symbol for diminished, and it looks like a degree sign. It's a little superscript 0, but up in the upper right of the name of the chord, right? And we have a symbol that just means augmented as well. It's a plus sign. You know, and that opens the door to wait. And then we have +7s, and then we have our +9s, and then we have add flat 9, and then
There's also the half diminished.
That's where I was just going. Yeah, yeah. So, who wants to know about half diminished chords? You sang a whole bunch of half diminished chords yesterday.
By accident.
Yeah, I meant to talk to you about some of those tunes you're singing, Sarah. It's like you gotta stop diminishing that. No. So when we get into the diminished world, which I didn't really want to go too far into now, we're talking about triads. Diminished triads first can have sevenths added to them, the same way major and minor can. But the fifth that you have in a diminished chord is different than it was in the major or minor, right? It's a half step less. We have a flatted fifth in those, right? And that means the seventh that is either a step and a half away from that flatted fifth or 2 steps away gives us 2 different diminished seventh chords. Well, if we make it the smallest one, I'll make this really short because this is, you know.
Oh, I was saying, I was just going, where are you going to go?
Yeah, I'm going to try to get out of here as quickly as possible because
of that double flatted 7.
Yeah, yeah. Why is there a 6th in a diminished 7th chord, huh?
Right.
Ah! Don't answer that, even if you know.
To bring us back to possibly more of the-
Oh, that's no fun.
You keep talking about dominant sevenths, and last year you talked about dominant as referring to in like chord references to each other. Now, if you're just talking about it alone in terms of one chord, I don't know what you mean by that.
Yeah. So the term dominant, like I said, like a few hours ago, I think, the term major seventh, for example, is applied to at least 2 different things in music, right? It's the interval it's just the distance between 2 notes that you play, 2 notes on the piano, an A and a G sharp. That's a major seventh.
Right.
But there's a chord called a major seventh, which is A, C sharp, E, G sharp in that case. And so dominant applies in a couple of different places too, but they are kind of related. They are related, not kind of related. First of all, the first place it gets used is the name for the 5th step of a major scale.
Mm-hmm.
Every step of the scale has a name, right? First one's called the root and tonic are similar words, but they're applied to different things, right? The root is not the first note of a scale. Tonic is the first note of a scale. The root is the first note of a chord. Yeah. Now, the rest of the names are not really important, but they're just so you hear them. Who knows what the 2nd step of the scale is called?
Nobody.
And who's on 3rd? Yeah, no, that's 1st. Wait. It's called supertonic. Yeah. Yeah. One of Dave's, most of you know that Dave Schumacher is one of my regular students, and one of his standard answers when I ask him a question, I'll say, hey, so why is this, that? And he goes, oh, nobody knows. Yes, so that's his go-to.
Computers work.
Yeah, that's his go-to answer.
One thing, since you brought me up, one thing you haven't mentioned, and I know you, is the difference between the real 7th and the flat 7th. It's the real 7th in the scale versus so the real 7th is the
dominant is 7.
Yeah, so see, we get in danger zone when we use real now as like, well, how are we going to define that? Is that, yeah, is that like the normal one? Yeah, well, what's the normal one? Well, there are two. There's a major seventh and a minor seventh in a scale as an interval, right? But so yeah, it's like the word real is like a plane 7 or a normal 7 or something, So the word we're missing there is dominant. And getting back to what Kathy was asking, the third step of the scale is called what?
Median.
Median. Yeah. And the fourth, that was a good guess. That's further away. We'll get to that in a second. 4 is called subdominant, and 5 is called dominant, right? Median is an interesting one. I'm going to divert on this for about 30 seconds, and that is because it sort of means in the middle, right? Well, it's the middle of a chord. Step 3 of the scale is the middle note of a triad. So it's a third above the tonic. So if we went a third below the tonic, what number would we be on? 6. What should we call that?
Submedian.
Submedian. Same distance, below. Okay, now put on your serious thinking caps. So why is 4 called subdominant then?
Because it's the backbone of the.
It's the same distance below as the 5th is above. Now, could it be that it's just below the dominant? We could ponder this for seconds and never come up with the answer. See? Nobody knows. But it's a handy connection to understand that a 4th and a 5th are the same distance. Yeah, that's part of it, yeah. They're also called perfect they're also common to both a major and a minor scale. So any major scale and its parallel minor scale have the same 4th and 5th note. Now that theory breaks down a little bit with note 2 of the scale, because a minor scale has a major second in it, but all the other intervals, 3rd, 6th, and 7ths are minor. Okay. You can tune back in now. I'm not going any further down that one for now.
Can I interject just to?
Please.
I think the question that you were really asking was that there's 2 chords, and that a 5 chord wants resolved to someplace. So I think in your notes from last year, you're looking at Neil talking about how a chord would want to go 5-1. And what we're talking about this morning is just the structure of that chord,
Okay.
not where that chord wants
But
to
he
go.
was talking about like a dominant 7th, and I
A
was
dominant
saying-
7's a 5 chord, and it wants to resolve to 1.
But of these 7ths that you mentioned, is it referring to one of those, or is it a different thing entirely?
It's one of those. It's the one. Well, wait. I'm not sure. Let me.
But if you're looking at a jazz sheet,
Maybe not.
all you're playing is 7th chords, right? I mean, you're going from an A7 to an X7 to a whatever 7, but within that song, there's only one dominant 7, correct or not?
In every key, there is one dominant 7th chord that we could call, maybe we don't really use this term, but there's one dominant 7th chord that's in the key.
Regardless of how many other 7ths you're playing in that song.
That was a secondary dominant.
Right. Then there's a whole family, a whole circle of secondary dominant
Which we
chords.
talked about last year.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And those are chords that are 5 of something other than 1.
Right.
So there's one dominant chord in the key. In the key of A, it's E7. Getting back to the dominant, I want to finish one more thought on the dominant thing there, because so we use the term dominant to mean the important parts of a dominant chord are it has to have a major 3rd and a flatted 7th, a minor 7th. Okay? And then it can have more notes in it.
Say that slower.
Okay. The definition of a dominant chord, when we call it dominant 7,
So
it,
you're using those 2 words interchangeably, dominant and dominant 7.
yeah,
in
because
this context.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, so actually, on one hand, we could call a chord dominant. It doesn't have to be a 7th chord. It just means it's chord 5.
Right.
in our key,
Yes.
okay? The same way we use the word tonic to mean home,
Right.
right? Okay. But now when we expand the dominant chord, chord 5 in any key, if we tack a 7th onto it, the other day I was having you visualize chords by what numbers they were in the key, not as 1, 3, 5. So when we're talking about chord 1, back to the tonic, as a 7th chord, it's 1, 3, 5, 7. That 7th is major because there's a half step in the scale from 7 to 8. So chord 1, when you tack a 7th onto it, is a major 7th chord.
Yes,
Our next major chord in the key is 4.
right.
4, 6, 8, 3. 4 to 3 is what kind of 7th?
Major.
It's a major 7th, because 3 to 4 is where the other half step is in the scale. Now, there are only 2 half steps in the scale, which means internally in a scale, there are only 2 places where you can have a major 7th. It's on the upper note of the 2 half steps. So if you start on note 4, its 7th is a major 7th. If you start on note 1, its 7th is a major 7th. Anybody buying that? Need a bridge?
I'm lost.
Could you take just one chord and show?
I was going to do that in just a second. Yeah, I'll play through them all in just a second. Yeah. Hey, Dan?
Yeah, several years ago, whenever Max was here last, he did something, an exercise that really helped to clarify for those of us who were there, the relationship of the 7th chord. So you basically start with a major 7, and then you flatten the 7, then you get the dominant 7, you flatten the 3, you get the minor 7, flatten the 5, you get the minor 7, flat 5, then you flatten the 1, and you're back to a major 7, and it was a really interesting exercise.
Yeah.
If we just stay with.
Voice.
Yeah.
Well, that's into voice now. Now we're
Yeah.
voice.
Yeah. Jen?
But if the dominant 7 is the 5/7, right?
Yes.
It's not the minor 7.
Right.
Because I always knew that, I never knew the term dominant 7th, I always knew just 5/7.
Yeah.
The 7 of the 5.
It's a 7 chord built on step 5. Yeah. And of course, step 5, the triad has to be major. And so getting to where I was going a second ago, is only chord 1 and chord 4 can be major 7th chords in a key, because that's the only places where there are major 7th intervals. If you start on note 1, 1 to 7 is a major 7th. And if you start on note 4, 4 to 3 is a major
So
7th.
if you're staying in the natural scale.
Yeah, we're not going melodic minor.
Those will naturally take a major 7.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, all the other chords in the key, the other 5 chords, whether they're major, minor, or even the diminished one, if we tack a 7th onto it, there are only minor 7ths left in the scale. All the rest of them are going to be a whole step below the root. So when we get to chord 5, we have a major chord with a minor 7th. So that's the only place in a scale where this chord occurs naturally, is step 5. That's why this is called a dominant 7th chord, because it's only step 5 of a scale that this can land on.
Got it.
Got it?
just clicked, the pen just dropped.
Okay, that was a loud penny too. It sounded more like a silver dollar. Yeah. So, okay, so I talked about a few minutes ago about in these 7th chords, the 3rd is major unless we designate otherwise by using the word minor. The 7th is minor unless we designate otherwise by using the word major, right? And to wrap up this whole dominant thing, maybe, is now we can have bigger chords. They can be extended. We can have more notes in them. Instead of just 1, 3, 5, and 7, we can add the next natural or the next logical note, which would be 9. Now we're talking about a 9th chord. Well, this counts as a dominant chord because it's a dominant 7th chord. It's 1, 3, 5, flat 7, and 9. So there are extended dominant chords, is where I'm going with this. And we can have a chord with a sharp 9, or a flat 9, or we can have a minor 9, which is not dominant anymore, because it's a minor chord. Right? Now, those all had different sounds, and when you hear them all like right next to each other, it's a little, you know, hard to place them. But certain chords like this have even more tension in them than just a 7th chord.
Is that the Hendrix chord?
That's the Hendrix chord.
Why is a ninth called a ninth as opposed to a +2?
Because chords are,
Just nomenclature, right?
well,
Nobody knows.
plus, you've entered some gray territory here by using the word plus. No, it's okay. I'm gonna go there. But plus and add are two other words we use in the names of chords that don't mean the same thing.
That's what.
Yeah, I know. It's like, get me out of here. You know. Yeah. Okay. So I'll go over those definitions kind of quickly. So.
People don't want to
No,
go.
I don't want
It's okay, we don't have to.
Yeah. Part of the problem is when we say, you know what you will never see written in the name of a chord is PLUS.
plus.
You will never see the word plus written out meaning plus, whatever plus means in music, you know, but you will see a plus, an addition sign,
Yes.
which can mean different things at different times. So, and it can be really confusing because if you see a plus sign, like C7 plus 9. Any guesses on what that means? I know some of you know, but no, it doesn't mean add 9. Plus and add don't mean the same thing. Didn't I just say that? Who's not listening? Who's tuning out? Because, did I really have to come to class today? Okay, let's go over add first because it's easier. Because it really only means one thing, I think. It means add a note to the chord without following the rules where you have to stack all your thirds. So if we call a chord 9, we need 5 notes in that chord, not just 4. It has to have a 7th in it. If we call a chord 11, we have to have 6 notes in that chord. We need a 7th, a 9th, and an 11th.
Oh, because you're only going by
You got to stack the thirds, and they'll fall down if they don't have somebody to stand on.
Okay.
Um,
Second penny just dropped.
Okay. So the word add absolves you of that. Means if I call something add 9, I need 4 notes. I need the triad and the 9th. That's all. It means don't waste your time with the 7th. We don't need no stinking 7ths. Now, that's a really common chord on the guitar. That's a C chord with a D in it. But I can't call this C9 because I don't have a 7th in it. Now I have a B flat in this chord. Now it's C9. So add, you usually only use the term add with the 3 numbers bigger than 7. 9, 11, and 13. Except that you almost never call something add 13 because 13 is the same as what other note? 6. Let's just call it 6 then. Because 6, you wouldn't need a 7th in a 6 chord because 6 is before 7 in most languages. So follow that a little bit. So the most common add chords are either add 9 or add 11.
But the 13, I mean, that's implying that it's, the 6th chord would be in the numerical counting up of the scale, this is an or in the next octave above.
Right.
You know it's the same note, it's an octave higher.
Right, so if I play a C6 by putting the 6th in the middle of the chord, well, there's a couple of mistakes I've made here already. This looks like a C6 chord. This sounds like a C6 chord to most people. But by putting in the sixth, I lost something. I lost the fifth. I changed the G to an A. That means I only have 3 notes in this chord. So something's missing. And worse than that, something that kind of goes into what Mike just brought up. Some people would say there's no such thing as a 6th chord, because what you think is 6 is actually the root of a 7th chord. If we think of 1, 3, and 5, and then putting the 6 on top, well, if 6 was our starting point, it'd be 6, 8, 1, 3, 5. So those 4 notes that you can play as what looks like a 6th chord are really an inversion of a 7th chord. Let's not go any further down that path right now, okay? But here's a better sounding 6th chord. Okay, now what I've done is put the 6th on top. I'm playing a C chord with an A on top. Now, that's got a lot more compelling sound than this, but you can hear the similarity now, too. There's some famous songs that start like that. Day after day. Opens up with a 6th chord, right?
And is the notation for add always ADD?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So ADD is always written out, for those of us afflicted by it, etc. And plus is never written out. Plus is always the sign. And getting back to that now, aside from the plus sign being used to mean an augmented chord, so if you just see D plus, that means augmented, which means raise the 5th from what we had, right? But when I played a 9th chord, here's my dominant 9th chord, C9. If I take the 9th, which is D, I'm playing the D on the 2nd string, that's the sound of a 9th chord. You hear it in bluesy stuff all the time. That's where you typically hear it, is in blues stuff on chords 4 and 5. Little turnaround, 1 to 4, 1 to 5. Except, they usually throw in this. What chord is that? It's an augmented chord. There's where we hear an augmented chord. The biggest bite you can get on a dominant chord is by raising the 5th. Anyway, Stormy Monday was last year's subject.
What plus means?
Yeah, yeah. We use the plus sign to mean raise or lower a note, sharp or flat. So a better term for plus or minus is, here's my C9. If I raise that 9th, a half step from D to D sharp, commonly people would write C7 plus 9. But that plus means sharp the 9th. Or they'd write C7 minus 9, which means flat 9. So a better terminology, I don't do this, but a better terminology is don't use plus and minus signs for that. Use sharp and flat signs in front of the number that is altered. So a better name to not get confused with this chord is C7 sharp 9 or C7 flat 9. But that's where plus and minus are used, to replace a sharp sign or a flat sign. Now, why would I have to call this C7 sharp 9 and not just, why do I have to have the 7 in there? If it's a 9th chord, it's got to have a 7th.
Took it out and you're putting it back in?
If I didn't have the 7 in there,
Could be an add.
C sharp.
no, if I didn't have the 7 in the name, in other words, I'm calling it C7 sharp 9. What would happen if the 7 weren't there written in that line? What would you see?
C sharp plus 9.
You would see C sharp 9.
Oh, okay.
what kind of confusion does that create if that's not the, C sharp 9 is a different chord?
Oh, yes.
Is the sharp talking about the C or the 9? The 7 is in there to separate the root and the altered note. So on one hand, that 7 seems unnecessary, but on the other, it's pretty necessary.
So it's contextual.
Right. It's in there to make sure that you know that sharp is talking about the number that it's preceding rather than the root that it's following. Because in our, the way we write stuff, if I say, we say the sharp or flat alteration after a letter. We would never say flat B to mean the black key on the piano near B, right? We would always say B flat. But when we use sharps and flats with numbers, when we go the math way, the sign always comes first. We would never say 3 flat. We would say flat 3. When my friends and I kind of like designed this whole musical universe about 600 years ago, we didn't take into account that was going to confuse people. We didn't really care. We didn't want to make it easy. Anyway.
Although they did somehow, at that timeline, insert parentheses in there to help.
Yeah, sometimes you'll do that. We talked about the 7th chords, that there are 3 important ones that you should be able to play. Someday we might get back to that. And there's a 4th one that would be the minor triad with a major 7th. So we talked about the 3 main types of 7th chords, which are major, major, which we just reduced to major now. Minor, minor, which we just reduced to minor. So that's kind of easy. Of our 4 choices of chords, we've got, both intervals are major, meaning the 3rd and the 7th in the chord we call major 7th, and both of them are minor in the chord we call minor 7th. But the chord that we now call dominant 7, or just plain 7, or just A7 or D7, is the major 3rd plus the minor 7th. Got all that so far? Well, there's a 4th one. That would be the minor chord with a major 7th. You can hear the dissonance in this chord immediately makes it, just hearing it should almost conjure up some songs that you've heard, But if I just out of the blue play a chord like that, it's like, ooh, where is this going, Well, so this is used in context almost exclusively in a progression that has this note, the root of a minor chord, descending chromatically. Now the next note I have to hear has to be this. So I need a different chord that has it in it. So this is where you hear that minor chord with a major 7th, and this is sometimes written as minor, major 7, sometimes like in parentheses. You might put MAJ next to it, or we might put minor plus 7, and that plus, I shouldn't have said plus, I should have said sharp 7. So that's where you would hear that chord. And this, again, tons of progressions do that.
But if it's on your music sheet, how is it going to be designated?
Either what Jem just said, minor, major 7, and the MAJ, or you might write MJ or something, and that might be in parentheses. It means a minor. So if you see minor, major in the same phrasing,
So M-I-N and then major.
or sometimes just a small m, to mean minor,
Yeah.
but then you have to put something else after it to designate major.
So minor, major 7.
No, that's only used with dominant 7th chords. So I don't know. I don't know that I've ever seen minor with the delta sign, meaning the 7th. I probably have now that I think about it, but that introduces another level of confusion, or,
To add to that, everybody does realize that I was talking about passing minors yesterday?
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Yeah.
Passing minors.
Can't stop it, right?
Yeah, this is not a restful chord, But heard in context of this, so that's the type of progression that uses that chromatic descent of a minor chord. Now, songs that you've heard, I was just making that up, but here's a place you clearly heard it. But it starts with a chromatic descent on a major chord. Here it comes. Every 24-year-old should be able to write a song like that.
Was that written on the piano?
He wrote that on the guitar. Yeah, Harrison. And interestingly, the key they eventually did it in was higher than that. So he took it up to C later on. And it wasn't until I heard a demo of this that it clicked with me that I've been playing it in A, that's how he came up with this little thing. This is easy to play with this, so it's got this chromatic ascent in the melody and a descent in the bass. Da, 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 da. Using notes out of the key, using a flatted seventh on the way up and a flatted third on the way down, making it blues. Doesn't this just sound like blues to you? I don't think so. You know, this is what happens when people don't know what they're doing and they just get turned loose with, it's. I keep, when people say, why did Paul McCartney do this? Why did Harrison do this? I say, well, because they didn't take lessons from me and they didn't know what they were supposed to do. They'll never make it.
Go nowhere.
Yeah, they didn't learn all the rules you're learning, which means, sorry to tell you that your careers are over.
It is true, though, that when you're playing in certain keys, things present themselves.
Exactly.
You can't sing it in that key, so you have to move it to another key, and then it's much harder to get to what you want.
Yeah.
But you found it.
Right.
You found that knowledge.
And so this whole thing just lays out really well in the key of A, and not so well in the key of C. But they changed it. George Martin probably helped them change it to C, and then they, now they had.
No doubt because of Paul's reign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's true of.
So was he able to play it then in the different keys?
Because they used keyboards more. They didn't have those licks played like on the guitar and stuff. Oh, and they didn't need to do them at the same time. In other words, so the musical tidbits that George put together there could be assembled in lots of different ways, but not by one guitar player. Not in the key of C. Not to get from, well, yes, he could.
That's like 9 or 10.
No, if you put it at 3, it would take your A up to C, right? But here's another song that he wrote differently than you've heard it. Well, that's how he put it together first. This is, of course, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. And he had this really delicate sound of playing in the key, thinking in the key of D minor, but capoing it up to 5 so that the D minor got even more delicate, let's say. And that would really put it in what key? Are people's math brains ready to process?
Let's throw that out.
Lisa's giving up. No, what'd you say?
Nobody knows.
Not quite.
A flat.
They're getting warmer, but you hit it on the head, except it's minor. But yeah, it'd be G. Now, if I'm playing a D minor chord, I know that in my D minor shape, the root's on the 4th string. So I put a capo at the 5th fret and play a D minor chord, the root is still on the 5th string, 4th string. So here's the root of the chord I'm playing here. I'm on the 5th fret of the D string, it's G. Right? Now what they decided to do in this was transpose it higher as well. And if you listen to George's demo of him playing this, he sings it really kind of softly and spookily almost, you know. But they brought it up a whole step, which then let him sing it, you know, more intensely. But it also brought into one of the greatest guitar keys ever. Much more powerful key, you know, and you know, this driving bass line, this descending bass line. This is very similar to what we just talked about with the half step, the chromatic descending bass line. This is nearly chromatic, except it goes down a whole step in the beginning, from A to G. You know, it doesn't have that delicate sound of this. There's the chromatic descent on the minor chord, but it's got the power of a whole step down is you know, and then gets chromatic. And gets all the way down to F, where we kind of expect, we need to get to E, we got to get to a dominant chord here, and we don't. It's like it left us hanging. You know, there are a lot of progressions that might do this. That one gets us to the dominant chord. And then, to drive it home even more, so it was the same bass line. A, G, A minor chord, G in the bass, F sharp in the bass, F, but got all the way to the bottom, got all the way down to E, so it sent it back. Anyway.
I love that.
Oh no, that is one. Oh, thanks.
So just for contrast, could you actually go back and play once again While My Guitar Gently
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously, you know, the other two songs we're talking about here. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You was the Led Zeppelin song, and that was, of course, 25 or 6 to 4. As Jim said, one of the greatest songs ever written. And, you know, with one of the greatest guitar players that ever graced this earth, Terry Kath, just playing his heart out.
Guitar solo that ever.
It is the greatest guitar solo. I would throw it in that category. And the other really amazing thing about that solo is, first of all, it starts off with kind of the melody. Something like that.
Yeah.
It was completely improvised in the studio. And, you know, halfway through he flips on the wah-wah. And And if you watch, there are some incredible videos of a show they did in 1970, I think, at Tanglewood on the East Coast. So there's a whole video of Chicago playing there, and people had barely heard of them yet. But Bill Graham needed them to fill in. Santana was supposed to play this show for him, and it's a place that mostly does classical concerts. But Bill Graham had like a deal with them. They were going to put on like 3 rock shows there one year. And Santana was supposed to be this one, and something happened and they had to cancel. And they were still just like, you know, they were kind of becoming big because of Woodstock just the summer before. And so Bill put Chicago in like as a last minute substitution for them. These guys were all scared, you know, out of their heads to do this thing. And again, it's this classical guitar reviewers audience and things like that, you know, the snobs of the journalism world. And they just floored everybody. And it is really incredible that there is a video of this that you can find on YouTube. You just search for Chicago Tanglewood. And then you'll see when Terry plays the solo in this, it's completely different, and it's just as ridiculous. Yeah, anybody that's not too familiar with Terry Kath and his life as a guitar player, which of course ended tragically just a few years later, he was like, Jimi Hendrix said an interesting thing. They played a lot in Chicago, and Hendrix was a big Chicago fan. And you know, and he had also had an experience as playing in horn bands. I mean, as the guitar player in bands that were backing up some you know, R&B type artists and things like that. That was Hendrix I'm talking about now. And the first time he heard them play, like at the Whiskey or one of the clubs in LA, he went backstage and pointed out to somebody in the band. He says, "You know, I've never heard horns that sound like one horn, and your guy's guitar player is better than me." That was Hendrix's comment on Terry Kath. So,
he's my favorite rock guitar player.
Terry? Yeah. No, it was just...
And I saw them live 4 times.
Yeah, I saw them a couple times too, and it was yeah, one of the first shows, second show I went to as like a 14-year-old or something. It was at Maples Pavilion in Stanford in like 1970, I think.
I saw San Jose Fairgrounds first time.
Oh, I saw them there too. I did, yeah. That was, yeah. Yeah, for the $5 tickets for a 3-act show usually back then or
About
something.
as close to Terry Kath and Peter Cetera as Lisa is to you right now. And everyone was standing, there were no chairs.
Yeah, in the exposition hall or one of those, or the other, the pavilion.
Sitting on the floor.
Yeah, so, God, and even the first song on their first album, Introduction, is just this incredible song. If you haven't heard much of the first 2 Chicago albums, you owe it to yourself to listen to them, because they were just doing stuff that was off the charts, and the things you could do back then, and be really creative, and you know, play some jazzy tunes and some all kinds of things that a few years later the record companies wouldn't let them do.
But literally, to tie this together to everything that you've been talking about this morning, they're like the perfect band. They're doing everything with 7th chords. They're doing counter melodies. They've got horn parts that are counter to what the rhythm section is. The rhythm section was crazy good.
Drum lines.
Yeah, I mean, every one of those guys was...
Not to mention the fact that Peter Cetera had kind of a good voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so did Terry Kath. And they would trade, you know, in the same song, like 25-6-4.
Yeah, trade lines.
And he had this low, gruff voice, Terry Kath did. And then Peter Cetera would come in the second part and go up into the string.
Yeah, when he gets into this... You know, those high parts were always...
And that's all harmony too.
Yeah.
Is there a meaning to the name, the numbers, 25 or 63?
There is, at least what Robert Lamb says, who's the keyboard player that wrote it. And it was partially a drug-fueled evening of trying to write songs. And he was like having trouble coming up with something. It refers to the time on the clock. It was 25 or 26 to 4 in the morning. And that's what he's talking about, is, you know, feeling like I ought to sleep, spinning room or head it's sinking deep. It's yeah, just yeah. So it's kind of psychedelic lyrics to go with a great chord progression. You know, getting back though to, because sorry, I could talk about Chicago for like another hour. You know, yeah. Although if it's not close to dinner time, I'm probably still good, right? We can. And even the last thing about Chicago is that some of their greatest tunes. This whole suite of tunes, there's like 6 or 7 pieces in it that are all kind of tied together, were all written by the trombone player, who was, one of the, best musicians in the band. Sorry, I can't even say that because these 7 guys were like 7 of the best musicians in the world. And the fact that they got together is almost like the Beatles. It's like, why did Lennon meet McCartney, And the fact that these guys were all students at a school, except for I think Peter Cetera came along just a little bit later, or wasn't in school with them, but they were, and it was kind of Terry Katz and the drummer Walter Parazader's idea to put together a horn band. And they luckily got hooked up with a producer who had already done some horn band stuff, James Garcio, who Blood, Sweat, and Tears, but before that, the Buckinghams, right? So, what was the Buckingham song? Yeah, kind of a drag. Yeah, came out in about 1967 or so. It was, what's that?
Mercy, Mercy, Mercy.
Oh yeah. So they're kind of a 1.5 hit wonder,
Susan is a chord hit.
Yeah. But the chord progressions in Chicago tunes are just fabulous. I guess I'm going to talk a little bit more about Chicago, because even this tune just does stuff with chord progressions. All right, our ear training exercise is going to be identify all the chords I'm about to play. This one we all know is what kind of chord? Major 7. Now, what happens to a major 7 chord if the root disappears or goes down a half step to what was the 7th, but now I don't have that root anymore? Well, this should be pretty easy because the music stand's not blocking your view as to what chord I'm playing. It's A minor. This song goes from F major 7 to A minor. The bass movement goes back up another half step to what would be maybe chord 4 in this key, B flat. Keeps going up again. Or if you have really long fingers, you can get away with this. Make it sound more like the piano. Stop, that hurts. Anyway, so playing Color My World on the guitar is a little bit more challenging, a lot more challenging than on the piano. A beginning piano player can play this. But the chord progression is really fascinating. F major 7 to A minor to B flat. And these are inversions of these chords because they so far haven't had the root in the bass. To G minor, which would be chord 2 in the key, G minor 7. And now, something's wrong with this. What kind of chord is that? Major 7. Yeah, A flat major 7. And something you never hear is parallel major 7 chords. And now we start lowering notes in the chord, right up Dan's alley. Making it diminished. And then up a half step to another major 7 chord. That's another nasty stretcher. Never mind. Finally back to 1. Must be C in there, huh? Yeah, just a beautiful tune. Then Peter Cetera sings this. Oh no, Terry sings that, I think, huh?
Robert Lowndes sang.
No. Color My World?
Yeah, I think he did.
I don't think so. I think it was Terry. Really?
I think it's Robert Lowndes. He wrote it and he sang it.
No, he didn't write Color My World. That was Jim Pankow. No, that was all part of the Make Me Smile.
Jim Pankow wrote that?
That whole suite. No, that whole suite was. Yeah, that's the whole make me smile suite. Yeah, no, I can hear the gritty voice. It's Terry
All
saying
right,
that.
somebody look it up. I'm not going to guess Neon, somebody look up and see who wrote Color My World.
Who wrote "Color My World" and who sang it, right? Yeah. Let's see. I think is that probably enough for today, or do you want me to? Huh? Quarter to 11. James Pankow.
Okay.
We have a winner.
That's a trombone player. We have a winner.
Yeah.
Who sang it?
Nobody knows.
I think I do. I was wrong about who wrote it. I don't know why I always thought he wrote it. I guess because it was piano, you know.
Yeah. And actually, my friend and partner who played with me last night, Greg, apologized to me later. He says, "Yeah, Merle Watson didn't write that song." I said, "Yeah, I didn't want to get too much into it on stage and correcting it all, but I tried to embellish your story a little bit with it. But anyway, so yes, it was really Chet Atkins who took. What do you got?
Chicago, it just says Chicago sang it.
Oh,
Saying
yeah.
Chicago, I can keep looking.
James Pankow.
James Pankow wrote it.
Wrote it. Yeah.
We know that.
Yeah, we know
And
that.
sang it.
Yeah. No, he didn't.
No, he didn't sing it. That I know.
Yeah, he definitely didn't sing it. They had 3 great singers, and all of them had different, voices and timbres, and man, it was just, yeah. When they needed the high stuff, Peter Cetera did it. When they needed the bluesy, gritty stuff, but Terry, so Terry, even stuff that's not bluesy. And when he was singing, "Children play in the park," that was him singing that too. So.
Well, I have a gigantic new respect for
But
you.
he covered it.
Just that you know all those Chicago tunes.
Oh, Terry Cath, we have another winner. Okay.
The answer you wanted, so it's a winner.
Yeah. Well, part of my problem is I think. Nah, I know everything. I don't just think I know everything. All right. Yeah. So, okay, let's wrap this up for today. I think if everybody's probably ready to go. Lynn didn't even bring her blanket. Yeah. Did I leave any stones unturned that we should polish up before?
No.
Good. Thank you. All right. I think we're off for till like lunch or something. You guys can goof off for a little while, and then we'll get on to the afternoon agenda. I think we're good.